As you walk down this path, shining, shimmering, splendid, at the foot of Pikes Peak, you stop at the fork in the road before letting your heart decide. Walking toward the Anselm Society Digital Pub, you open your eyes, taking in each wonder by wonder with every new step. Inside, you see a whole new world of conversation on the arts, faith, and whether we're only dreaming. In the corner are 3 people, sitting at a table by the fire. One of them looks like he's about to burst into song. And that's me, Matthew Mellema. Welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. The Anselm Society is a coalition of churches across the Front Range of Colorado dedicated to one very simple goal, a renaissance of the Christian imagination. If you'd like to find out more about the Anselm Society, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. And while you're at it, why don't you check out Anselm's other podcasts or other resources, information about our different events. And don't tell anyone this, but most importantly, rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Really helps us. Your 5-star reviews do a world of difference for us. I love all of those reviews to pieces, even the couple 1 stars we've gotten, but whatever. So with that said, Mandy
Yes.
Houck is our guest here.
Yes.
I want to tell you a story that I think is relevant to today's guest.
All right.
When I was in college, the head of the English department, I was an English major, was a guy named Dr. Gary Gwynn, or, Dr. Gwynn. And he was a good guy, but he was, the senior professor there, sort of like this old school authority. And he kind of terrified me. No offense, Dr. Gwynn, if you're listening. So then after I graduate, I send him an email. I need him to write a recommendation letter for me. And it's like, hey, Dr. Gwynn, blah, 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 groveling. I remain your humble servant. And he responds to me a couple days later. Hey, Matt, good to hear from you. And just so you know, once my students graduate, I like them to call me Gary. And As I'm reading that, it's like, I am never calling you Gary. You are always Dr. Gwynn to me. So the reason I say that is when we had the email back and forth with our guest here, he did not call you Mandy. He called you Mrs. Houck, and I assume it's for similar reasons. So, Mandy,
it is.
I'll let you explain that and introduce our guest.
Oh, excellent. Okay, well, our guest is Hudson Jungck, and Hudson came to the school where I was teaching and was in my class, my creative writing class. I believe he was 10th grade. Is that correct, Hudson? Was it 10th?
I think so.
I think so. So that is why I'm Mrs. Houck to him. But I do want to say, and I've said this at many a guild meeting, and Hudson always ducks his head and looks all modest because he is. But as soon as he turned in his first creative writing assignment, I was like, I have nothing to teach this person because he is an extremely gifted writer. So... But it was really fun to have him in class, and he's a good friend of my daughter, Emmy. He's actually going to be in Emmy's wedding in October because he is the best friend of the groom. Put it on the record, Hudson. Best friend. Very close friend. Okay.
Yeah, one of the best friends of the groom.
One of Lucas's best friends. So, yeah. So anyway, so that is so Hudson he went to Colorado Christian with my daughter Emmy, and he's a fantastic young man, but he has to practice calling me Mandy now because it's been 10 years, 11, something.
All right. Now, Hudson, I will say, if you want to keep calling her Mrs. Houck, no judgment here. I'm not calling Dr. Gwynn Gary, so that's up for you to decide. But Hudson, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So my name's Hudson Jungck. I am, 26 years old. I'm currently working as a content marketer at a software firm up on here in the Springs, and am looking at or midway through the discernment decision, basically throwing into a hat and pulling out exactly which divinity school I want to go to. So that's going to be, hopefully I'll be going that this fall. But yeah, and I absolutely adore movies. My roommate and I have a bi-weekly film club, and I've always been particularly passionate about them, which I think plays into the topic for today.
Yes, and Hudson is also one of the member artists in the Guild. And a week or so ago, we had our first in-person meeting of the Guild since COVID hit. Yes, hashtag Vax Life. and we were all outside, and it was wonderful. And as we're talking, Hudson just does a broadside against Disney, Marvel, everything related to Mickey or mice. And he does this, and it's like, okay, we need to just hash this out on the podcast. I believe I've made my love and admiration of Captain America, Black Panther, and all those other Marvel heroes. Ant-Man, shout out him, very well known. And I have some kind of back and forth opinions on Disney, so I thought we could just talk Disney, whether we're talking about in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Star Wars, the princess movies, the park, whatever. It's huge. It's gigantic. They're basically villains from a James Bond movie now. I think the CEO's headquarters are at a lair on the bottom of the sea. But
how would we know? We
would never know.
No.
And basically, I wanted to just let Hudson step up on his soapbox, give his speech contra Disney, and then me and Mandy can either agree or disagree from there. So, Hudson, I'm stepping off the soapbox, gesturing you on. The soapbox is yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, man. I do love soapboxes. Yeah, I'm going to move pretty quickly. I mean, honestly, it's been a long time since I've had somebody give me this kind of opportunity. I think when anybody that knows me well enough, when they start hearing me talk about Disney, is like they tune out and they're like, well, let's do everything we can to dissuade him. So in a time-sensitive way, I just have some thoughts. Yeah, so like looking at Disney, I think the hardest part about it is that it's so difficult to parse exactly what we're talking about. I mean, that's because Disney is so massive. I mean, you're right. It's like the villain in a James Bond film, but I mean, it really is probably more akin to something like Amazon or Apple. It's a profoundly powerful tech company. I mean, think about like the properties that Disney has. Disney has Pixar, they have Star Wars, they have Marvel. Lord willing, they don't get Harry Potter, or else they would just actually have the complete monopoly on like the mythic sources of meaning in our culture. Anyway, so like,
and they're probably going to trademark the term mythic sources, so you can't say it. But anyway, keep going.
They might have already trademarked it. But anyway, so like, I think it's misleading to look at a monopoly and say that, okay, a monopoly that like lowers prices for consumers or a monopoly that entertains us is okay. I think we're seeing what we're seeing with Twitter, with Facebook, with Amazon, is that there are incredibly dark sides to our own wants and our own desires. And that when you have these particularly like, they claim to be nonpartisan, but like very partisan, like whichever form partisanship they espouse, like these massive companies that dominate huge portions of our lives. Now, with Disney, they don't just dominate portions of our lives. I think they primarily dominate two things. The first is they dominate our myths. Like our myths are like our aspirations, our roles, like the limits of our thought worlds. And they also I do think they dominate our dreams. Like you can look at Hollywood, you can look at the movie industry, and you can see that it's. I mean, it might be a little bit of a stretch, but really, when you think about it, it's kind of a dream factory. Like, I'm not going to sit and have my own dreams. I'm not going to come up with my own dreams. I'm not create my own dreams. I'm going to go and watch someone else's dreams and let them become mine because they're meaningful to me. So first off, I think my biggest problem with Disney is that it's a monopoly over like our psyches. It actually, like when I said, like I think at that guild meeting, I said that it like terraforms and colonizes the imagination of a generation. I understand that that's pretty bombastic, but like at the same time, I'm not sure it is, because it's actually meaningfully influencing the minds and emotions of an entire generation, of multiple entire generations. And I think it's particularly dangerous because Disney is safe. Like, I think that's something that, some conservatives have had some difficulties with, like Disney animated films, looking at them like, okay, are there hidden meanings or anything? But for the most part, like, especially in an incredibly godless, you could say, and just scattered like media landscape, Disney is a brand that means hope. It's a brand that means that you're like, send your kids to watch it and they're not going to hear profanity. They're probably not going to encounter any sort of sex scenes. And yeah, so it's effectively like a brand that means safety, but it is still a brand. And that's why, for instance, like Captain Marvel, I know that there were problems with like the main actress's, Brie Larson's political activity outside of media. But
well, nobody really likes her.
Well, I happen to.
I do. She was really good in Room, but that wasn't Disney, so that's
I'm not talking on screen. I'm talking. Okay, I obviously read deeper into the Marvel gossip sites, and you guys. Anyway, keep going, Hudson. Keep going.
Yeah. I'm saying as a film, though, a lot of people hated it. Like a lot of people like that I talked to said, "Oh, this was a terrible movie." They were saying that it's a horrible movie, and I would suggest that what it was just off-brand. And I think that's significant because the more, like, when you have 30 plus movies, most of which, I don't know how many times people have rewatched Marvel Disney movies, but I know when you're talking about the MCU, we're probably talking about something like 7 to 15 rewatches per movie, especially if you really like it. That changes you. Like, you can't habituate yourself to a particular brand or a particular style of filmmaking that much without being shifted, without being changed by it. So that's sort of my overarching thing. I recognize that there's Star Wars. I recognize that there's Pixar. I like Pixar. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say there's something evil about Pixar. Anyway. And Star Wars, I mean, I guess there are different approaches. One approach would be to say that the last 3 films were so, well, let's just say abominable, that they basically, I mean, every, like, declining box office revenues with every film that they drove a beloved franchise back onto Disney Plus. And I loved the first season of The Mandalorian. I really did. But then the second season, it's like there's some good episodes, but a lot of the episodes are just basically like panning across, like, these are the upcoming attractions on Disney Plus. It's like, okay, that's, but I think, like, that's in sort of the meta version. That's what I think that's my primary, like, big B beef with Marvel. Let me just do a couple more points. I think one aspect of it, like, of this mythology, which it really is, it's a mythology and it's a dream, and what exactly is it shaping us to believe? So first, I think when you look at the different mythologies that the characters within the universe hold, like you have, Doctor Strange's quasi-Eastern mysticism, you have Thor's Asgardian beliefs, and you have Captain America's Christianity?
Christian nationalism?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Okay, Mandy.
Proceed.
Keep going, Hudson.
Yeah, so, like, I'm saying each of those mythologies, each of those, like, character mythologies are legitimated in the universe. Like, you see that Doctor Strange's quasi-Eastern mysticism, like, there's some power to it. And Thor's Asgardian beliefs in Endgame, like, his mother accurately foretells the future. And then we don't know what Captain America's pseudo-Christian, hopefully not nationalism, what that does. But basically, it's like taking all of these mythologies and then showing that they are fundamentally powerless against true evil. And, like, that includes Christianity. And so the only people that can truly save us from Thanos are these heroes. Like, are these, like, big, broad, like, massive, like, colorful heroes. I think that's problematic. Like, especially because I remember like the days before the MCU, like the days before, like, Iron Man, and then Disney buys Marvel in 2009. Like, I remember, like, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, like Spider-Man 2, for instance. Like, I remember when superhero films really emphasize, like, that, like, I mean, I guess that a way of approaching it would be like, if evil is banal, then goodness has to be, which sounds really pretentious. But basically, it's just like that heroism is about, like, the ordinary heroism. And so you get, like, these scenes, like in Spider-Man 2, where Doc Ock is coming towards Spider-Man, he's stopped the train, and everyone in the train, like, forms ranks to keep Doc Ock from reaching him. Like, that was powerful.
Yeah, I remember that. That was,
yeah, but it's like you don't get the same impact in, like, the heroism of the ordinary seems really diminished. I recognize, like, everyday people have power in the MCU films. I mean, unfortunately, there's, like, Iron Man 3, where Pepper Potts gets a lot of power, and then it's like, well, okay, this power is killing you, let's take it away. Then there's, like, Tony Stark, but, I mean, really, like, the vast majority of these heroes are either super brilliant or super geniuses, they're spies, they're everything except ordinary. And I think, like, maybe Don Cheadle might be the closest thing, or maybe Monica Rambeau, but they don't get a lot of screen time. So that's, I think, a significant thing that we're losing. But really kind of to bring it to an end, or bring it close to an end. I want to talk about WandaVision because like this, like many of the films in the MCU, I appreciate. Like I thought Thor Ragnarok was fun. I didn't think it was much more than that. I strongly enjoyed Doctor Strange. I think Black Panther will cool over time, but for right now, I think it's a decent film. Captain America Winter Soldier, I suppose Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Obviously, I'm also somewhat frustrated by the cancellation of many shows, for instance, Luke Cage, Daredevil, Jessica Jones on Netflix that I thought were decent films. I mean, actually decent films in the sense that, yeah, they were of that quality. Mm-hmm. But I thought they were decent shows, and Disney axed them in order to pour more money into Disney Plus. And what Disney Plus has given us during the pandemic is WandaVision. Now, for anybody who hasn't seen it, I'm sorry. I'm gonna like burn through this. But basically, WandaVision is about this character, Wanda Maximoff, who's the Scarlet Witch, who, after the death of her brother Pietro, and then the death of her husband,
her cyborg
Vision,
lover.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Don't just blow by that element.
But anyway, keep going.
Yeah.
So, like, she snaps. She creates a copy of her ideal android husband, creates 2 kids whom she later deletes, like tears 500 plus people like into a living nightmare. Like the show doesn't really do this justice. Like whenever it shows people who are in this like forced illusion, it's excruciating. I mean, they are in torment.
That's a good point. Like they showed it, but only briefly. They didn't really go into depth about how horrifying that would be.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's one thing if it's like the mad woman who's like incredibly powerful, which I think is a trope that Disney probably didn't want to like fall into. So like it's one thing if she's not conscious of what she's doing. But the show makes it very aware that she is entirely conscious of what she's doing. She's conscious the entire time. And so we're asked to identify with her. And like the villain isn't Agatha. Like, I mean, Agatha is a kind of a side villain. The real villain is the person who wants to violently shut it down. And like that's just a misalignment of sympathies. That's, I mean, an idealization of a character who's doing something actually monstrous. And like I remember when American Christianity and like American evangelicalism in particular like split into like warring houses over Harry Potter.
I like how you used houses.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah, so like I remember that.
Yeah.
And it's just actually somewhat shocking to me, like how much Disney and how much the modern MCU is able to quote unquote get away with. Now, I'm not making a comment about whether or not we should not watch Harry Potter.
Are you calling for another boycott of Harry Potter, Hudson?
I'm not calling for another boycott.
I survived the first one, and I'm not up for a second one.
Listen, I survived it too. Okay, you and I can go to go to an actual pub and tell war stories. What I'm saying is that like I think American evangelicals or an American Christendom in general is far, far too passive in the way that they appreciate, in the way that they engage the MCU. I think that we need to be deeply committed, active, like witnesses of Christ, not just looking for Christ figures, because I think that can actually do damage. Because if we're saying that like, oh, this is a Christ figure, that's a Christ figure, then we end up creating a number of other like partial gospels. And then we go for one and like it's very easy to just, oh, it's a Christ figure, and that just washes out like any other critical element.
Right.
What I'm saying is that I think we need to critically engage Disney. We need to critically engage exactly what it is that Disney is showing us, is asking us to believe. Basically, I see Disney right now as doing the same thing with our imaginations that Apple is doing potential, or not Apple, but Amazon is doing with our buying habits, that Facebook and Twitter are doing with the way that we exchange information. And that, I think, is fundamentally why it's why I stand contra Disney.
I love that. And I had not thought of, I mean, I'm picking up one little point about a lot, but I'm really stuck on the Wanda thing because I really loved that show, and I didn't like what she was doing, but I didn't not like it enough. Like she was the villain, but she was the protagonist for us, and that's really disturbing.
Yeah.
I hadn't even they snuck it by me, and I didn't even. It's an insidious thing, like you said.
Yeah.
We view them as safe, therefore they get away with things. I mean, as long as they don't have, a gay couple, then we're not going to be up in arms.
Exactly.
No, seriously though, like if they tried to have a princess movie where she tries to marry another princess, then forget about it. They would lose the evangelicals. But they're doing so many other things that we should address that I hadn't thought of. Ooh, made me think there.
Well, now I would like to step on my own soapbox now, and I'll give rebuttal to my learned opponent here. Not even opponent. I agree with some of what you said. So
I have no soapbox. I just want to make sure.
Oh, Mandy.
I'm just watching the soapbox boys, and I will respond. But go ahead.
So let's talk with your first point about the monopoly over our psyche. And I think I agree with that largely. I think that's very true. And it makes it kind of hard to talk about Disney in the larger scope because it's kind of a hydra. It's so many things. It's a streaming service. It's a park. It's sort of bottled nostalgia and family fun magic. So it's hard to look at all these. But if you look at the different properties, you can see good things and bad things. So let's start with some of the things that I intensely dislike that you did not mention. And apologies to my friends and family because I make this rant a lot. But the live action remakes of the beloved classics, I hate so passionately.
I have heard this rant.
And again, Mom, I know you like them. That's fine. It's fine. Okay. Danielle, I know you like some of them. I love you. But okay, just bear with me here. Because these are things that they don't need remakes. Beauty and the Beast stands up just fine, They didn't really change the plot. They just sort of made it CG. Lion King, it's shot-for-shot remake and some things. It's CG and slightly worse voice actors, It's very clear that what Disney is doing is, one, printing its own money because it can. Two, flaunting the monopoly that it has over our imaginations, like you were saying, Hudson. And three, I just find it deeply depressing that the best things we can do is repackaging old stuff in a slightly worse way. So, and then let's not even get started on the Mulan remake, which took place in the part of China that the Chinese government is using to commit genocide on the Uyghurs. Yep. So they do that, and then they talk about having all their nice little trendy progressive politics here at home. But anyway, I digress. Taiwan's a country, by the way. So let me talk about the stuff, especially with the MCU, because I think that's the only place where I will push back slightly. I think that when we're talking about, you talked about the heroism of the ordinary. I totally agree that is a really important theme to see in arts and entertainment, but it's not the only theme. If you look back at other cultures and other places, it's not uncommon to find myths about heroes and gods duking it out. I think on its own, there's nothing bad with the collection of heroes, having the fate of humanity and the cosmos on their backs. I think that's a perfectly fine myth taken on its own. And also, a lot of the heroes within the MCU are normal guys. Look at Captain America, Steve Rogers. He's a little dude, too scrawny to get into the military, even though he keeps trying. But then some doctor, seeing that he's a good person with good character, gives him the super serum, and that's what makes him a superhero. He wasn't born it. He's a scrawny dude, and he's rewarded for his good character. And you can do that with other people, too. I mean, Hulk becomes a hero by accident. Scarlett Johansson, what's her name, Black Widow, becomes a hero kind of by an accident on her birth, all this stuff. So you can find that along the way. I mean, one of the heroes is a raccoon. What's more ordinary than a raccoon superhero? So let's move on now to Wanda Vision. I think this is where I'm going to push back the most. I'll just say I thought the first 4 or so episodes of Wanda Vision were fantastic. I thought they were great. Then the final episodes, I thought they were fine. They're kind of paint by numbers superhero movie after that, but I thought they were fine. I disagree with your portrayal of Wanda. I think the series makes it pretty clear she was not aware of what was going on at first. She doesn't regain her memories of what happened and piecing it together until about midway through the series. So, episodes 1, 2, and 3, when she's like in the 60s or the 50s, she's just sort of part of her own delusion. And then she's battling with her delusion. And yeah, she does some horrible things there. But I think that's an interesting thing to wrestle with, where the protagonist is dealing with undeniable grief. And in dealing with the grief, she ends up hurting lots of other people in the process. And realizing that is part of her journey. Did they execute it perfectly? No. Was it flawed? Yes. But I think when you sort of take a step back, that's a pretty good thing to look at. One final closing thought I have that doesn't quite fit neatly into the other categories is I find it really interesting with Disney, this delicate dance between the mouse, like the brand writ large, and the individual talent. Because there are individually wonderfully talented people working at Disney, directing the movies, animating the movies. A lot of these are extremely well done. Like, let's just take one example, Taika Waititi, who's a fantastic director, did Thor Ragnarok, did some of The Mandalorian. Fantastic job by a fantastic filmmaker who got pretty free reign. But let's look at and you can look at things like that. Like, I encourage folks to look at the gallery for The Mandalorian. It's sort of behind-the-scenes look on Disney+. And, yeah, some really smart, really talented people talking about basically their free-reign creative process that they used to make a really, really interesting series. So there's the good examples. Then we have the bad examples, like what happened to Edgar Wright, who is one of my favorite directors, and who was pegged to direct Ant-Man, and it would have been awesome, but he couldn't. There's a lot of back and forth.
See, I don't know of this. Tell the story.
Basically, it looks like he spent a long time making Ant-Man. There's a lot of back and forth with the studio about the different things he needs to do. Like, oh, you need to introduce some of the other Avengers here. He needs to fight with this person. Oh, you need to introduce this thing. So then he leaves the project, and the director who took it over did fine. Like, I enjoy Ant-Man. It's a good movie. But if Edgar Wright had been directing it, it could have been a great movie. But it wasn't because Disney got in its way. I guess what I'm saying, Hudson, is I agree with you mostly, but I will push you back for the honor of Wanda Maximoff. So what say you in response?
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, first off, as I did at first, I entirely endorse Pixar. I mean, I think Pixar is doing some fantastic things. I think Up is probably more a philosophical treatise than a film. It's astounding.
I love Up. I'm not a fan of Kevin. Kevin, kind of the bird.
Yeah.
Like, go away. I like everything else, and then Kevin is just weird. But I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, I love Up.
Yeah. So let me just take the kind of observations that you made in sequence. First, you talked about the way that Disney, like how it might not be as bad of a thing as I'm making it out to be, that Disney tends to, or at least the MCU tends to portray heroes as gods and legends and not so much as ordinary people. I'd point out that the examples that you cited, Captain America, he's actually kind of idiotically good. And then he gets a super soldier serum without which, as the film makes very clear, he would have been able to do nothing. Tony Stark, again, is brilliant. I mean, Spider-Man he got his powers by accident. He's also brilliant. The Hulk is a super genius. I think in the actual, I'm sure some Marvel head is going to correct me on this, but I think that the Hulk is either third or fourth in the actual, like, Marvel universe's list of the most intelligent human beings on the planet.
Okay. Yes, there is an actual list, and people on it include Tony Stark, Bruce Banner, T'Challa, so Black Panther is on the list, and the Mr. Fantastic from Fantastic Four.
Okay,
among others.
May I interject, being the elder stateswoman?
Are you asking why I know that? And it's not important,
it's not.
Don't worry.
No, I am just interjecting as the elder stateswoman in this scenario.
Sure.
That when I think of Hulk, I think of now I can't remember the actor's name. Well, Lou Ferrigno. Because I watched it. This is how old Mandy / Mrs. Houck is. I watched it on TV, not in reruns. I loved the Hulk. And so that's what I remember. So to me, I'm like, was he smart? I was pretty young, so I didn't remember him being smart. That comes out in the movies? Or are you guys saying, oh, it does?
No, it does. Yeah.
Okay. I think I don't pay enough attention. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, no. So I think that list also includes Norman Osborn and definitely.
Which one is that?
Green Goblin.
Okay, thank you.
And
I'm just here to represent the listeners who were like, what are you talking about? It took me a minute to realize MCU is Marvel Creative Universe. Did I get that right?
Cinematic.
Marvel.
Oh,
Marvel,
dang it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Marvel Cinematic.
I'm here for you, listeners. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and I recognize that like different cultures have like different approaches to mythology. However, I think what our culture needs right now, like in a world where each of us are feeling helpless, like in the face of COVID, in the face of world that's, I mean, dominated by the news, like you can give it any sort of reason for the perception, but I mean, the world is terrifying.
Yeah.
And we don't need heroes. Like we need stories of how individual human beings can be heroic. And that's exactly why I think like Disney's missing it. That's something I think, for instance, DC has done much better. Like the scene when, what is it? Yeah, The Dark Knight, between those who are on the ferry and those who are in the prison ship, where they both throw the detonators out of the windows and the Joker's plan fails because there's actually something good down at the heart of people, but you don't see that in Marvel.
I see what you're saying, because even so let me see if I can reiterate what you're saying. So taking Captain America as an example, Matt's argument is that, yeah, but he was being rewarded for his character. But then your response to that is, okay, but his character is not really ordinary people character.
Yeah.
And then he still was magically or scientifically, whatever, enhanced in order to be able to do the heroic things. So, this is interesting. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, now, I mean, I fully acknowledge, and I think I did originally, that there are elements of this. I mean, what Tony Stark does at the end of Endgame. By that time, I was thoroughly jaded with the Marvel Universe. And that still, like, ripped my heart out a little bit. That was incredible. So I think I'm not saying that it's a categorical difference, like we don't see anything like that. I'm saying that we don't see enough of that. And that's where DC and pre-MCU films gave us much more meaning.
Yeah, and I think that is a fair point. I think on their own, a lot of what Marvel does is really impressive and can be really good. You know, just the sheer scale of what they did, over 14 years in 30 movies, putting together something that came to a actually pretty satisfying conclusion, weaving all these different stories. Come on. You were just talking about how Endgame had a good ending.
Do we have to have a sequel?
I said Tony Stark's ending.
Well, okay.
Splendid.
Well, Tony Stark started Phase 1 with the first Iron Man, so that story arc there. Well, I'll just say reasonably good, I think that's good. But the fact that it's basically the only shop on the corner, right? They're the only game in town. Right. And part of this is because DC has been so inept in so many ways in getting its own film series going. Part of this is because Marvel's been subsumed into the Disney behemoth, there aren't any other ways to compete. Yep. But these other stories that could be told that have the themes you were talking about, Hudson, you were talking about the themes that you want. I was like, well, I'm sure plenty of other movies could do that, but those movies don't get made. And those movies don't get made because Disney so dominates the field. Mm-hmm. So Disney gives us some good stuff that I think you can use for really good purposes, but it takes away everything else.
It takes away so much. I mean, when they bought the Muppets, I thought I was going to die. I mean, the Muppets? Why are you? And I know that.
Oh, are they going to have a crossover?
Oh, good heavens. I mean, even though Matthew was completely wrong, along with Evangeline, about the best Christmas Carol, because obviously it's the Muppets, I know that he is
I had Muppets second.
That's insufficient, Matthew. Anyway, the problem is, I think, it's the same with Amazon, like you guys keep saying. It's the problem of a behemoth and a monopoly that it homogenizes things to its own vision, and then you have less diversity of idea and thought and approaches. I mean, I don't have a soapbox, but I did make a pro and con list, so I don't know. But, and that's one of that is an obvious con, is that they just keep taking everything over. I mean, they bought ABC, too. They bought
ESPN.
They bought ESPN? No, well, didn't ABC already own ESPN? So was that a package?
That may have been a package deal. They've owned ESPN for a while. Well,
they've owned ABC for a while. That's why Good Morning America promotes Disney films all the time. And I stopped watching it. But anyway, it's just, it becomes this thing that you can't escape because it's literally their fingers are in everything. And actually, Peter's cousin worked for Pixar from the beginning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So whenever people find that out, they're like, can we get a job? They actually, here's a secret, people. Don't tell anyone. We have so many listeners. This is going to get out. But Pixar actually has, if someone is recommending someone for employment, if an employee is saying, hey, I recommend this person for employment, they have a secret little box at the bottom that the person can check. I am doing this because this is a relative and they asked me to. So they can still.
List of cons?
Yeah, no.
Okay, yeah.
No. But I think Pixar is the one entity that has somehow managed to set itself apart. I don't know if it's something in the contract that they do not seem to have been ruined by Disney, but so many other things has that stain of Disney on it, and you could it's like a scent, Yeah. And I don't know what the heck they're going to do to the Muppets. I don't even want to look up how long they've owned them. I don't want to know. But Disney would never make Muppet Christmas Carol. Let's be honest. There's no way Disney would have come up, right? There's no way. So,
and that's actually how I started, I guess, kind of building up the sheer detritus of what eventually amounted to a soapbox. It was just watching MCU films and smelling something off. Just watching, and something felt too photoshopped.
Packaged.
It felt like it had been made by committee. Like it wasn't tailored to appeal to me so much as it was tailored to appeal to the average viewer. Like, what would the archetypal American want to see? When would they laugh? When would they sigh? How will they experience tension?
Well, every film is designed to promote the next.
Yep.
So I think that's part of it. It's not made. Walt Disney is not. I don't sense him anymore. It's not about art and innovation. It's about it's all all of it is marketing. I loved The Mandalorian. Like y'all said, I'm glad to hear you didn't like the second season as much. We would be halfway through an episode and I would say, wait, what? I completely lost track of what was happening because it just wasn't as good.
Well, I will disagree slightly. I think the first season was better, but I really enjoyed the second one too. For all of my thoughts, I point you back to the whole episode we did on The Mandalorian where me, Brian Brown, and another podcast guy talked about it. But I think that is getting at it too, because, and again, I'm talking as someone who really enjoys. I really enjoy most of the Marvel movies. I really enjoy some of them, but I feel like even the ones that I do enjoy, there is sort of this. There's this veneer. There's this Disney veneer that you have to sort of look through. I think The Black Panther is a really good movie. I think the themes that it explores are actually really interesting.
Stunning.
But there's still this veneer. I think, again, I'll go back to Ant-Man. I think that's the best example. If it wasn't for the Disney veneer, I think Edgar Wright would have made a great movie. As it is, he had to leave the project, and the movie that results it's good. I enjoy it. It's a good movie, but there's this sort of blockbuster tax that you have to put on it.
Yeah, blockbuster. I would say the main reason I like Ant-Man is because I adore Paul Rudd. I don't know.
Well, everyone loves Paul Rudd.
I know. Who doesn't? But honestly, if you think about it, I don't know if it would have been a good movie without Paul Rudd. If they had, the casting saved it.
No, that is true.
That's interesting,
I think one of the good things about Ant-Man 2 is it stayed to one of the nice things about the MCU is it started exploring different genres. Like Winter Soldier was a spy movie. Thor Ragnarok was an action comedy. Same thing with Guardians of the Galaxy.
Fat Thor is my favorite. I love Fat Thor.
I have the most serious man crush on Chris Hemsworth, and my wife thinks it's kind of weird. But
no, Chris Pine. Chris Pine is the best.
Oh,
Chris.
Mandy, no, Chris Hemsworth is clearly the best Chris.
We need a Chris podcast because I will take you down. I will build a soapbox on the Chris Pine thing.
We'll find someone who supports every.
If I can,
Chris, there's at least 4 of them. But
yeah.
If I can quickly respond to you, Matt, on Wanda Vision, I think that's somewhat of a specious statement. Wanda, in the beginning, it's clear. What happens midway through the show is that what she's been repressing comes out. Mm-hmm. There are glimmers that she's aware of it. In other words, she sees what she's been keeping under. But the thing about repression and psychological repression is that, the fact that you repressed something, because there are so many glimmers, there are actual psychologists that will look at this and say, repression doesn't mean that you're unaware of it. It means that you are intentionally hiding it from yourself, which means you're still aware of it. And then let's look at what she does after. She realizes this. I understand she's got this, she's sick with grief, which is obviously why she had to pull in, 500 people to living hell. I mean, that makes perfect sense. Actually, it doesn't. And that's the thing. It's the scale of what she's doing, the sheer scope of what she's doing to these people and their families is something that I think the show, actually, I don't just think, I'm very confident that the show distinctly glosses.
And I don't disagree with you entirely, but I do think I think the calibration in the show is different than what you were describing, where I think the show calibrates so that if she was aware at the beginning, it was only dimly aware. There are these sort of half-baked memories that she's actively repressing because she likes the reality that she's in.
Yeah.
And also, they spend some time with the people she's enslaving, not as much as they should. But also, I think that serves a larger point. I guess I don't see why it's intrinsically bad that we have a protagonist who does a really bad thing and then moves on from it, has some sort of reconciliation moment. So that
I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm saying the way that they framed it is bad. And the fact that they found the show's truest villain in the guy who's trying to shut it all down. I have no problem with what she did. I mean, I think it's problematic, and in the narrative, it's reprehensible. I don't think the show did a very good job of portraying that.
The main bad guy from the nameless government entity, I agree that part was kind of overdone and
that's kind
tacky.
of a trope, right?
Yeah,
I loved Agatha though.
Yeah,
I love that actress. I've loved her for a long time, and I'm so glad that people have figured out who she is. I think she's
and I'm
fantastic.
Glad she's become a meme.
Oh, she deserved. She is memeable. Yes. Yeah. I think I see what you're both saying. It is obviously fine for protagonists to do bad things. Not fine. You know what I mean? In the story, from an artistic perspective, you want your protagonist. Sometimes the protagonist is bad. Oceans 11, 12, 13, 25, whatever. But I think they tried to pluck at our heartstrings. I think that's what Hudson is saying, is to make us, maybe they played the sympathy card a little bit too much. Maybe if we'd been allowed to really sit with the gravity of the consequences of what she did, even if we do understand she did it in grief. And I think they treated, because grief is it's horrific and it can wreck people, obviously. And so I think the fact that they built an entire show around how horrific grief is something to commend them for. But in the choices she made, even in being unaware of them, how much grief did she cause? So maybe they could have and should have shown that a little more and let us sit with it more.
Yeah, and I think all I'm saying, so first, I do think that they rather badly framed it. I think, we don't have time, but I think we could go down and explore that a little more. I think the thing that bothers me the most is that it seems like nobody's asking these questions.
Because it's Disney.
Yeah.
And we let Disney do Disney. Right? No, I think that's what he's saying,
we
because
come
we
back
just
around.
trust Disney.
We come back around, yes. Well, and also, how much can they go into depth and explore without upsetting the base of people that they're looking for, right? So I wonder if this is really
marketing.
like, maybe
Right.
WandaVision is a 5-star concept that gets docked down a star or two because of the Disney veneer that we need to keep putting on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Disney.
Disney.
I would have loved to see like WandaVision made by the same people who made Jessica Jones. Because like Jessica Jones explores the same tropes, the same concepts, like, I mean, obviously not magic, but, you know, like mind control and...
Ooh, I haven't seen it. Apparently I need to. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that's just one of my like glorious counterfactuals.
Your druthers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually.
Oh, Disney. So before we close this up, let's do something in honor of our mostly gentle tyrants over us. I want us to all share, one, our favorite Disney movie when we were a kid, and two, what we believe the greatest Disney song is. Let's start with you, Mandy.
Start with me.
I want to put you on the spot.
Well, my favorite movie, I always really liked Cinderella. And yes, it was from when I was a kid, but I'm pretty sure it had already been made. So I'm not that old. I was born in 1969. Cinderella's older than that, right? I think so. Anyway, I always liked that one mostly probably because of the animals. Everyone, you know, you give me a cute little fat mouse and you've got me. I love that. Best Disney song. What are you doing? I mean, not Let It Go. That's for sure. I don't know. Can you come back to me for the song?
Okay, fine. It's sort of like we're ordering at a restaurant and we need to skip.
Yeah, I have not decided on my side.
I'll share mine. My favorite movie growing up was Beauty and the Beast, the good animated one, which is one of 212 reasons why I hated the new remake so much.
Auto-tune. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been thinking a lot about favorite Disney song.
Okay.
Mandy.
Yes.
I'm in my mid-30s now. I don't have to keep the pretense up.
Oh, no.
So
Is it Let It Go?
Honest. No, it's...
good.
I believe my favorite Disney song is A Whole New World.
That's a good song.
I said it, and I'm only a little bit embarrassed by it. All right, Hudson, your turn.
Wait, hold on. I went to Little Mermaid in the theaters when I was like 20. So don't be embarrassed. Go ahead. Sorry. Hi. Okay.
My favorite Disney film was The Jungle Book when I was a kid, and I think my favorite song is The Bare Necessities. That's
a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, I just realized I know exactly what my favorite song is. But I can't think of the name.
Well, why don't you hum a few bars?
It's the one from Hercules.
Oh.
The one
he
love
sings.
Song?
No. It's the mission.
I can go the distance.
Go the distance.
How far.
That is such a good. I love that song. It's actually like the chords and everything. It's not even just the lyrics. I will now force Bethany to watch the podcast Anyway, listen to the podcast. Hercules is her favorite, and you should have her on the podcast to defend Hercules because she.
Ooh, I may do that.
They always forget Megara when they talk about.
Hey,
Disney
she's a real
women.
person in the mythology.
I know.
Real in mythology. But anyway.
Hercules is overlooked. But yeah, go the distance. Yep.
Okay. Well, There we go. Well, thank you both for coming on for this lively exchange of ideas. And to our Disney overlords, if you have taken over everything and this becomes a thought crime, I, for one, welcome our new Disney overlords.
Are they going to buy the podcast? Maybe they'll buy the podcast.
They're in advanced discussions with Anselm right now. But again, Hudson, Mandy, thank you both so much. Really appreciate that. You guys coming on. And... Well, everyone, things are winding down at the Anselm Digital Pub. The fire's down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society. Rate and review us on iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you all again, and we will see you next time.